A delinquent from his class is hanging out in his room, and the situation fills him with dread. Before the worst-case scenario unfolds, he knows he needs to kick her out, but he has no idea how to do it. He tries a diversion, telling her that he bought juice, all while internally panicking, desperate to prevent her from discovering his weaknesses. Yet, before he can act, she calls out to him, holding up his stash of 18-plus content. She teasingly points out that he has quite a collection, and without hesitation, asks which one is his favorite. He is utterly stunned, realizing she has already found his vulnerability. Panicked, he pleads with her, begging her not to reveal this to anyone at school. He is trapped. If word of this spreads, the way girls see him will change forever. To his relief, she promises not to tell anyone, on one condition. She demands he do the thing he always does when watching these videos, threatening to expose him if he refuses. His heart sinks as he pleads for forgiveness, frantically telling her she shouldn't be watching such things. However, she sternly commands him not to turn it off, insisting he hurry up and do it if he doesn't want to be labeled a pervert. He retorts, defeated, that he will be treated as a pervert regardless. But she persists, telling him to focus on the screen. Suddenly, she gasps, clearly shocked, as she realizes that he's been watching some rather extreme content. In that moment, he knows his school life is over. He resolves then and there not to let her set foot in his room again tomorrow. His life at school will be ruined if she exposes him. Determined, he plans to confront her now and put an end to it. But before he can gather his courage, she catches him off guard with a question. Smirking, she asks if, as a big breast maniac like him, she qualifies as someone with large breasts, claiming she thinks hers are quite big. He is speechless, stunned by her audacity, and when she demands he answer properly, he fumbles for words. In his mind, he promises himself he will face this challenge tomorrow. She is, as expected, in his room again today, and he tells her there's no reason for her to be there, demanding that she leave. She nonchalantly refuses, saying she's tired. Annoyed, he becomes frustrated because he can't relax when she's around and feels unable to do what he wants. Sensing his irritation, she proposes a challenge. If he can physically move her off the bed, she will go home. She insists brute force is the only option, and with a smirk, she declares that his time starts now. He stands there, stunned, thinking it's an impossible task because it would mean he'd have to touch her. But she presses him, reminding him that the clock is already ticking and that if he can't bring himself to touch her, there's no way he can win. He knows she's well aware of his hesitation and his lack of confidence, inwardly cursing the situation. He protests, calling the challenge unfair, but she looks at him, genuinely confused, and asks what exactly he means. Then, laughing, she taunts him, suggesting that he's simply too embarrassed to touch a girl. She adds that even for a virgin like him, he should at least have some experience with girls by now. Her words frustrate him further. This is why she's such a delinquent, he thinks, because she deliberately makes people hate her. Determined to prove her wrong, he resolves to get her off the bed and make her feel embarrassed instead. But as he steels himself, she catches him off guard with a sly comment, asking why he's looking at her so lewdly. Mustering his courage, he tries to use force, attempting to move her, but she doesn't even budge. With a smirk, she effortlessly flips the situation, tossing him onto the bed instead. She then informs him that his 2 minutes are up and mocks him, calling him pathetic. She jabs at him further, asking just how weak he must be to lose to a girl, and confidently declares that he won't be able to move her off the bed for the rest of his life. She teases him one last time, telling him he should try his best tomorrow if he really wants her gone. Laughing, she points out that he seems to have frozen up. He's gotten nervous, lying there in bed with a girl. He begins to think that maybe losing to her for the rest of his life wouldn't be such a bad outcome after all. She shows up at his room again, but this time, she's sleeping like a log. This poses a problem for him, because if she sleeps, he won't be able to rest. He tries to wake her up, but as his hand hovers above her, he remembers how terrifying it was when she was woken up by the teacher at school. Fear overtakes him, and he freezes, unsure of what to do. His hesitation has now led to this current predicament, but he quickly regains his resolve. It's his room, after all, and regardless of whether she gets angry, he decides he'll wake her up and make her go home, that he calls her name. But when he looks at her face, he realizes that even her sleeping expression is scary. His determination falters, and he hesitates to stand his ground. He decides that, in order to avoid triggering anything, he'll approach the situation slowly and gently. Yet, he can't shake the feeling that waking her might lead to some kind of misunderstanding. Confused by his own thoughts, he wonders what strange ideas have crossed his mind. Before he can figure out what to do next, she suddenly grabs his hand. Fear floods him, and he nervously tries to explain, telling her it's all a misunderstanding, that he only wanted to wake her up and wasn't trying to do anything inappropriate. She calls him a bastard and, to his surprise, begins rubbing his hand. He becomes more anxious, afraid of angering her further, and finally decides to just let her continue sleeping. In the end, she remains fast asleep, and he sits there with his hand growing numb. She comes to his room again, and soon after, her friend Misaki calls her. Immediately, she's stunned, realizing that they've been exposed. She anxiously declares that Misaki will call her out tomorrow and accuses her of being irresponsible. He sighs, thinking how loud she is even while in someone else's room. Whatever happened must have shaken her. When she asks if she should go to Misaki's place instead, he freezes. This is exactly what he's been dreading. He doesn't want that, as her friends are all delinquents like her, and if they start coming over, his room will truly turn into their hangout spot. She begins to mention the idea to her friend, and he knows he has to stop her. She casually adds that there's a guy with her, pinning him down with her legs, and tells Misaki that he's just a classmate. He feels the strange sensation of her foot pressing against him, but manages to get her to hang up the call eventually. Relieved, he pleads with her to reconsider, reminding her that this is his room, and he hopes she didn't tell her friends anything. She brushes him off, calling him annoying, and assures him she didn't say anything to them. Then, with a teasing grin, she asks if he's that desperate to make out with her. He's stunned by the sudden remark, momentarily thinking that being with just her might actually be better than dealing with her friends. But he quickly rejects the thought, stammering. She laughs, telling him she was just joking, and wonders why he's getting so worked up over it. Still, he can't help but worry that the worst-case scenario is bound to happen in the future. She tells him to calm down, promising she won't invite her friends over. This room, she declares, is her personal hangout spot, and she's decided to keep it all to herself. She warns him not to let anyone else besides her into the room. With that, she announces she's going to sleep as she drifts off. He's left wondering if, somehow, this arrangement might actually prevent future problems, or if this is only the calm before the storm.